Welcome to Dark Facade, a channel dedicated to looking past the veneer of humanity and finding its true face. I will be your tour guide down this winding path of tales, ranging from the supernatural, science fiction, and twisted love. All the stories you're about to hear are assorted bits of literature that will range from the bizarre to the unexpected. So sit back, lower the lights, and allow yourself to be taken away from everyday reality to its shadowy reflection. If you enjoy our unusual content, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to receive more. Thank you. Edie, Part 2. As predicted, Edie had sat quietly on the shelf of his study for the past few weeks. Nothing out of the ordinary had happened, and to be honest, Professor Harris was able to work quite comfortably with the wicked little thing staring directly at him. He was busy entering another passage in the journal he was keeping to document the whole event when a gentle tapping on his door broke his concentration. "Who is it?" he asked. "It's me, Daddy. Can I come in?" his daughter inquired in a small voice. "Of course you can, Ella," he said, while getting up from his chair to stretch. The office door opened wide, allowing the little girl to skip into her father's study, then into his arms. He scooped up the 7-year-old and kissed her softly on the cheek. She giggled as he swung her around before resettling into his chair with her on his lap. She stared up at him adoringly with her pale green eyes as he twirled her sandy curls in his fingers affectionately. Aside from his work, she and her mother were his world. He loved them dearly. The fact that Ella was a tiny version of his wife only made her more precious to him. "Were you working on a new book?" she asked. "Not quite," he answered. "I'm hungry. Will you come have cookies with me?" "Well, yes, but where's Jessie?" "Mommy sent her out to go get some things," Ella replied. "Okay, come on. I could use a break anyway," he said, after saving his work on the computer. Ella skipped happily towards the kitchen with her father in tow. He stopped a moment at his wife's home office door and peeked in. Julia was poring over a brief as her assistant was busy on the phone answering one of her clerk's questions. He remembered when they met on Stanford's campus so long ago. From the minute he saw her, he knew she was for him. The fact that she turned out to be bold, brilliant, and beautiful didn't hurt either. Julia looked up in time to see her husband staring at her. She smiled softly at him before refocusing on her work. He silently slipped away, leaving her to her task. When he entered the kitchen, he saw his daughter had already gotten out the milk and spilled a little bit on the floor, which their Springer Spaniel was already cleaning up. "Thanks, Murray. You're a real help," he laughed as he reached for the Oreos. The sound of the front door opening drew his attention to the hallway. Jessie's voice carried along the corridor. She was not alone. A man was chatting pleasantly with her as they strolled towards the kitchen. Professor Harris got up from his chair to see who it was. The petite blonde entered the room with Casey Bellows behind her. "Oh, good, Professor. I'm glad you're here. I didn't want to have to disturb you," she said. "Hi, Chris. Just thought I might drop in and see how things are going," Casey told him. "Sure, no problem. Why don't we adjourn to my study?" he suggested. The journalist took a seat as Harris closed the door behind them. He smiled when he saw the place of honor Edie had been given on the shelf directly behind the doctor. "So, is it business as usual around here?" Bellows joked. "Pretty much," he shrugged. "Really? No strange sounds, weird occurrences, or blood spewing from the walls?" "Not so much as a hangnail," Harris assured him. The two men exchanged pleasantries for a few moments more before Casey got up to leave. On his way out, he turned to the doll to give her a personal farewell. Well, Edie, you've succeeded in being a disappointment. I suppose I will have to find something else for my readers to talk about. See you later, Chris, he said. Goodbye, Casey. Harris smiled as the reporter closed the door. His office phone began to ring almost immediately, causing a slight twinge of irritation. He sighed before answering it. Dr. Harris, my name is Jacqueline Moyer. I understand you are currently in possession of a cursed doll named Edie? This is correct. How may I help you, Mrs. Moyer? It's Mrs. Moyer, and I would like to meet with you. There are some things I need to tell you about that doll, and I would rather not do it over the telephone, she told him. Mrs. Moyer, I'm well briefed on Edie's past, he assured her. Ms. Powell and that journal she gave you are not the full story. Dr. Harris, please, just give me a few minutes. It's important. Against his better judgment, he gave in and agreed to meet her at a park nearby. As he pulled in, he thought about turning around to leave, but she would probably just call back and keep pestering him. He got out of his car and locked the doors. As he walked, he managed to convince himself that this could be an interesting addition to the journal he was keeping, that he would later publish. As he walked up the white concrete pathway, he saw the gazebo where he was to meet her at. Upon his arrival, however, he saw that his strange new acquaintance may have beaten him there. A middle-aged black woman was sitting on one of the benches watching the children play in the distance. She was dressed rather conservative in a button-down white blouse and navy knee-length skirt. Her hair was cut in a business-like bob and came down past her chin. She was clutching something in her hand, but he figured if this was indeed Mrs. Moyer, she would tell him what it was soon enough. She looked up as he entered the structure and saved him the trouble of guessing if it was she that he was here to meet. Dr. Harris, thank you for coming, she said, extending her hand courteously. Not at all, Mrs. Moyer, he replied as he sat down. I know for you to come here and meet me shows a great amount of trust on your part, but I couldn't keep silent. Just know that whatever happens, or what you decide today after speaking with me, I can live with myself knowing I told the whole truth about what Edie can do. He nodded, giving her a silent consent to go on. My father was the youngest child of Evelyn Dupre, the grandmother that you and the world know as the one who was found dead after trying to burn Edie in the fireplace. Professor Harris's eyes widened and realized her connection to the doll. He moved absent-mindedly closer to hear her story. First, let me ask you, what exactly have you read in that journal Jane Powell gave you? Well, there is enough blood and mayhem caused by the little jewel to fill a horror novel, he replied. Does it talk about what happened with my Uncle Douglas and his family? How he snapped one night and shot them all to death before killing himself? Yes, as I recall, the doll came to be in his house after your grandmother's burial, he said. No, it wasn't supposed to, she declared. I beg your pardon. Everything you read in that fake journal she gave you was only half true. You see, my grandmother had shared her concerns with her children about the doll, and yes, they were guilty of not believing her until that morning they found her dead in her house and Edie untouched by the fire. What are you trying to tell me, Mrs. Moyer? Are you saying Jane Powell gave me a fake journal? Why would she do that? He laughed. Because it's all she had to give you. The journal that you're in possession of was the written accounts of Ms. Marshall, based on the research she did about Edie and the stories she managed to collect from the community. But the truth, the whole truth, is not in that book, she explained. So what and where is the whole truth? He sighed. Here, she answered, holding out a leather-bound folder in front of him. And what is this? He asked. Written accounts of my family, those that suffered at the hand of that thing. He cautiously reached out and took the folder from her hand. Before you foolishly continue to let Edie stay in your house around your wife and child, you read about what she did. My Uncle Douglas wasn't the only one she destroyed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Moyer, I don't understand. If Edie caused so much destruction among your family and you knew it, how did she end up in your homes? He asked skeptically. Children are easily deceived, Dr. Harris. No matter how many times my aunts and uncles tried to get rid of her, she always showed back up. She always managed to convince us children she was our friend. She always made us trust her, told us she was only trying to protect us, and therefore we had to hide her and keep her a secret. We always did. We? Mrs. Moyer smiled before turning around and pulling up the back of her shirt. Terrible scars covered her back. It looked as if this woman had been beaten within an inch of her life. Professor Harris gasped in shock. With a bitter laugh, Mrs. Moyer turned around and tucked her blouse back in. She stepped closer to where her now speechless companion was sitting to give a final warning. Whenever men like you try to tell the world there's nothing beyond what we see and what we know, I can't help but laugh. I know better, Professor. I don't have the luxury of being a skeptic. All I have to do is look at the back of me in the mirror. I'm reminded every day of what senseless evil is and the price you pay if you let it in. You cannot expect me to believe that a rag doll is responsible for this, Mrs. Moyer. Edie didn't put those scars on your back, he replied while shaking his head. What I expect, Dr. Harris, is for you to read that file. And if you're foolish enough to continue to keep that thing around your family, then you are more imprudent than the children she manipulated. Mrs. Moyer gave him her card before departing. Professor Harris sat quietly in his seat for a few more moments to collect his wits. It was a lot to take in, and his head was spinning. The walk back to the car was very solitary, and he suddenly couldn't bear the silence. When he got inside and placed the folder on the seat, he turned on the radio. The insipid noises of a used car ad filled the black void of stillness that had unsettled him. He was almost back to his normal level of comfort when an announcement came over the airwaves that caused him to stop short and wrote. The radio personality announced the sudden death of renowned journalist Casey Bellows. A few details were given, but the one that stuck out the most was he had been found in his home, hanged. The police had not ruled it a suicide yet, but it was pointing in that direction. While the rest of the world may be content with this simple explanation, Professor Christopher Harris, for the first time in his life, was consumed with doubt.